This is the new Norton Manx R. You've seen it already over the last few months. Today we're at the Monte Blanco circuit in Spain. We've ridden it for a couple of sessions on track and then we've had a really fast ride out on the road. And there is so much information that I have about this motorcycle to share with you, but I think we should start with how important this bike is for two different companies. For Norton, it represents a rebirth, a resurgence, and perhaps the strongest chance this company has to date of coming back to greatness. They've failed and been resurrected multiple times over 100 years, and this truly is their best chance at it. For TVS, this motorcycle represents the ability that they have to create something super premium and really high performance. This is TVS telling the world that we can make the best bikes in the world, and that's probably why TVS decided to make a 1200cc superbike in an age where superbikes are really very niche and probably dying out. This is a statement of intent. Right, so let's get to the whole point of how the TVS and Norton relationship works. TVS owns Norton, but they haven't just bought the company out and given them a free rein to do what they want. TVS is also heavily invested into the brand in terms of technology, support, and there are really interesting things going on in how this motorcycle comes together. For example, it uses the best components from around the world in terms of brakes. You've got the latest Brembo high pure calipers, you've got Marzocchi electronically adjustable suspension, Marzocchi manually adjustable steering damper, Pirelli Super Corsa tires, but you've also got a great involvement from India. For example, the V4 engine is fully assembled in India. Norton says that they visited the TVS facilities and they are so state-of-the-art that that was the best place to make that engine. So the engine is made in India. Many of the components are actually sourced from India, but some of the really high-end components like the titanium intake valves, they come from America. The engine is made in India and the cast aluminum chassis is cast in India in 5 different pieces. It's then shipped to Norton's factory in Solihull where it is welded together, and then that welded frame is then CNC machined to give you perfect mounting points for your foot peg hangers and the swing arm and bodywork, and that's how the bike comes together. So it is manufactured in England, but with a lot of support from India and also leveraging TVS's massive networking capabilities. TVS has a lot of pull with companies like Bosch and Brembo, and that helps Norton get not only a lot of attention, but also the best equipment and tailor-made for this motorcycle. So that's the overall story. Now let's get to the bike. As you know, this is a 1200cc V4. It is based not even based, but it's the same architecture as the previous 1200cc engine that Norton used to use. So it's the same bore and stroke as the old V4 SV, but power has gone up. It's now 206 horsepower. And what Norton is really proud of is the torque. It's 130 Newton meters, which in itself is the highest in the liter class superbike segment, but it also comes in at just 9,000 RPM. And that means that they are prioritizing usable performance. On most superbikes like the Panigale, the S1000 RR, the peak is coming at 13,000-14,000 RPM. You've got to really wring them out, and it's all concentrated up there. Norton tells us that 70% of the torque, and that is about 100 Newton meters, is available as low as 5,000 RPM. And you really do feel that when you ride this bike. Technology-wise, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. There's split control throttle bodies, so the front bank and the rear bank on the V4 engine can be controlled separately, and that gives them greater control over how much traction is going to the rear wheel. It helps reduce the intervention of electronic assists. That same system also allows rear cylinder deactivation, so when the bike is below 5 kph coming to a standstill in traffic, it can deactivate the rear cylinders. The valves are still functioning and there's fresh air circulating through the rear bank, but the fuel supply is not happening, and that helps control heat. Now, we've ridden in some incredible Spanish weather through the day. I have no sweat at all, which is so unusual compared to us riding in India in a leather suit. But in the towns that we rode through today, you could feel some heat coming off the bike for sure, but Norton assures us that this is a benchmark when it is compared to V4 competition, and hopefully this bike will be manageable in India, because as awesome as the Panigale is out on track, it is quite a nasty thing to ride on the road, and I just don't like riding bikes like that on the road anymore. So we'll have to see how the V4 is, the Norton V4 is. But I can tell you that sub 2000 RPM, it still behaves a little more like a V4 than an inline 4. So like a ZX-10R or something is a lot more mellow on the bottom end, and you can hold higher gears at slow speeds, which is great in Indian traffic. This tends to behave a little more like a Panigale, a little more lurchy, and not even lurchy, it's just a little more grumbly at low revs. So we'll see how that is in India. what I really love about this engine, and the engine is probably my favorite thing about this motorcycle, is the way it delivers power and how you have to work less on this bike. Out on track today, the immediate thing was that you just don't have to hunt for crazy revs. You have to remind yourself on bikes like the S1000RR and the Panigale that it's all above 12,000 RPM and you have to go hunting for that. Here, 11,000 is good enough, and anything upwards of 6,000 RPM is a really strong surge of power. They also have what they call a unique phased pulse firing order. So what they tell us is that the first two power pulses are quite close to each other, and then there's a gap for the third, and then an even bigger gap for the fourth, and that supposedly has a good effect on traction. I had a great time with the traction on this motorcycle today. Couldn't really tell whether it was electronics or the bike was just hooking up. It was all really smooth. Another effect of that firing order is the fantastic sound that this bike makes. It's got a growl, bark and roar that feels closer to the Aprilia RS V4 than the Ducati Panigale V4, and it's pleasingly loud for a Euro 5 Plus compliant motorcycle. You can also feel the rumble of the engine through the bike, which only adds to the experience. But thankfully there are no intrusive vibrations and we never had buzzy hands or feet. Now, Monte Blanco is a new circuit for me. This is a new motorcycle for me, and we started our day out on the track. The first session was really awkward. The second session got a little more comfortable, and that was the end of the track riding. So I will have to spend more time with this bike, especially to go through all the electronics and understand it better. But the overall sensation is that this is absolutely an out-and-out track-ready superbike. Yes, it is heavier than the competition. We'll get to that in a bit, and you do feel that in certain transitions, like from left to right. It does feel like a heavier bike than an S1000RR or a Panigale. But it is so capable out on track, and Norton's test rider set a 1 minute 41 around the circuit, which, if you know your lap time is around here, is really quick. Will a Panigale be quicker? I am quite sure it would. It's got the extra top end power, it's got the weight advantage, but Norton isn't really pitching this as a track superbike. They're going for more of an all-round usable superbike experience, and in that sense I think this bike is easier for an average or above average rider to exploit, because you just don't have to work as hard, especially with the engine. On track, another thing that was really impressive are the brakes. Now, fully fueled, depending on which model you spec, this bike can weigh between 210 and 220 kilos. It's not a small amount. But those Brembo high pure calipers were superb. No real issues with frightening brake fade, no issues with nasty intervention from the ABS. They just performed, and they gave us a lot of reassuring performance out on track. So that was something that was really good. Now, we started the day in track mode, which you would logically do, and the bike didn't really feel very nice. It felt like it wanted to run wide. It wasn't as natural as we'd have liked, and there's also the fact that it was our first session on an alien racetrack to keep in mind. Cold weather in the morning as well. But then we were advised to shift to sport mode when it comes to the suspension setup, and that really helped make a difference. And now what Norton has done is they say that track mode with the suspension is set up for a really pro rider who's running the brakes all the way up to the apex and keeping the front end really loaded, which most of us, if not all of us, weren't really doing on a new track and on a new motorcycle. So sport mode suspension let the bike feel a little more friendly, settle into a good flow. It was easier to hold lines, and it was definitely more fun. The suspension setup itself is not as nuanced and detailed as you'd get on a Panigale. So the suspension modes are preset and you get what you get. Unlike bikes like the Panigale, you can't individually go into the suspension settings and set them up as you would like. Now, Norton tells us they've done that for ease of use, and again, this is a road bike, an overall usable bike. But if you've got so much technology in the motorcycle, you might as well offer that as well. And speaking of suspension technology, this Marzocchi suspension has a potentiometer in the front fork, and that not only tells it how fast the fork is compressing, but also where in the stroke it is. And based off that information, the suspension ECU can then tell the rear shock what to do. So this is really intelligent suspension, and from what we did today, it worked really well. The track sessions were a little too short for really exploring what this motorcycle was about, and just as we were warming up and getting used to things, we then headed out on the road ride, and that was actually a lot of fun. Spanish roads are the greatest in the world. The weather is wonderful, there's very little traffic, and the surface is pretty much like a racetrack. Getting out onto the highway, we were on some rough roads and mild potholes, and you could tell that this is obviously a taut superbike and it's not soft, but it's also compliant, and to a reasonable extent it absorbs the road very well. That was quite nice. There's also the sense that the riding modes aren't as you would find in other superbikes, where road and rain mode are just, too soft to use and have fun. I enjoyed keeping this bike in road mode even through some really fast riding in the twisties, because the suspension seems to cope and the throttle response is again calm and the bike is moving with the road, and I really enjoyed that. As for comfort, well, they have done a good job with the ergonomics. It's absolutely a superbike riding position, but it's not as extreme as something like a Panigale or a ZX10R. I think the balance between the handlebar position and the foot peg position, there are no extremes here and it's reasonably comfortable. What issue I had was actually with the shape of the seat. Now, this seat starts to curve upwards from here, and then it curves upward like this. And on track, I found that curve kept pushing me forward, which was fatiguing me in the arms. And this is more or less a tall person problem, but I would have liked a longer seat, both on road for fast riding and on track. It is a comfortable seat, but that is one issue. Seat height is also going to be quite tall, like it would be for most superbikes. It's 840 mm. Now, there are 4 different versions of the Manx available, and we are on the top version that will be available to public. There's basically the base model, the Apex, the Signature that we have here, and then there's a first edition which is really limited and we don't even know what the price is. All 4 models give you the full engine specifications, the same hardware in terms of braking. You get manually adjustable suspension on the base model and then the electronically adjustable suspension from the mid model onwards. The Super Corsa tires again are standard. On the base version, you get cast aluminium wheels. On the Apex, you get forged aluminium wheels. And on the Signature, you get carbon fiber wheels. Those make a big difference. I've known this from experience from riding the S1000RR. Carbon fiber wheels reduce unsprung mass even more than forged wheels, and they just make for a really light feeling motorcycle. What you don't see is that all of this bodywork is actually carbon fiber, real carbon fiber, except you can see it in this panel. And all of this bodywork, interestingly, is made in India. We don't know who the supplier is, but we do know it's coming from India. So that's a cool thing. Now, as you could imagine, with all this carbon fiber, the Signature is about as light as you would get this bike. 203 kilos without fuel. It is a 14.5 litre fuel tank, which has its own problems because that is quite small. It's smaller than a 390 Duke. But when you account for 90% of this fuel tank full and the weight of that is about 9.5 kilos, you're still at 210 kilos for this. And the base bike is 210 kilos without fuel. So you're nearly 220 kilos there. And there's a 20 kilo weight difference, pretty much 17 to 20 kilos when you compare it to an S1000RR or a Panigale. So that is one drawback to this motorcycle. Most of that weight comes from the company's decision to prioritize luxury and style over outright performance. For example, the fully keyless system adds a few kilos, as does that gorgeous single-sided swing arm. The stylish rear subframe, which looks like a continuous extension of the main chassis, also could have been lighter if it was a slimmer unit. Finally, Norton put a huge amount of effort into making sure that there were no external fasteners visible for all of the bodywork, and doing that also brought in some extra weight. You only really feel that weight in certain situations. On the track, for me, it was left to right transitions where it was a little more effort than I thought a bike like this should have. On the road, it's in situations where like you're taking a U-turn or you're just picking it up off the stand, it's a little heavier than you would expect. I am curious about how the handling will get affected because Norton has given us the best possible experience with all of this carbon fiber. How will this bike behave with cast wheels? How will it be with the forged wheels? There will probably be a difference, so hopefully we'll get to try that out at some point as well. Alright, so that's more or less what we've learned of the bike in terms of how it rides today. It is a fabulous engine, a nice chassis, a little on the heavy side, but there's also a lot of technology here. Now, they're giving you so much stuff, I'm probably going to forget some of it, so we will put a table up that you can refer to right now. And now that you've seen that table, let me run you through the things that stood out to me. First is the big 8-inch TFT display. It's the biggest that you'll find on a superbike, and It's good to look at, it's nicely laid out. It's also touchscreen if you want to use the touch function. You can also use it through the switch key over here. This is lovely switches. They've really tried to go for this modern, refined vibe with this motorcycle. And these are actually aluminum switches. It's not just aluminum switch cubes like you would get on the Royal Enfields. They look wonderful, they feel nice, and they do add a very classy touch to the motorcycle. What's a downside here is that the screen takes a really long time to boot up. It's between 10 and 15 seconds before it's ready to go. And we found that it's a little slow reacting, it's a little glitchy. Sometimes the switches don't respond as you would expect them to. There is some work that Norton needs to put in over here in terms of changing riding modes and just the fluidity of how the system works. I think there is room for improvement there. Another thing that I did not like today is the fact that this is a small fuel tank feeding a very powerful and a very hungry engine. So it depends on how you ride, but getting more than 200 kilometers out of a tank on this is going to take some real gentle riding. And if you go flat out, I don't know, less than 150, less than 140 kilometer range, on the track, that's fine. You just come in, fill it up again. But on the road, you need to plan your riding. And Norton has not made this easy because they aren't giving you a fuel gauge. There's just a sort of warning lamp and a distance to empty once you hit reserve. I'm not sure why they've done that. I think a fuel gauge would be a really valuable thing, and I hope they're able to engineer that back into the motorcycle. Right, so there are a lot of electronic assists in this motorcycle for the rider. The riding modes themselves work quite nicely. They're all quite usable. There's a lot of functionality in the track modes in terms of what you can do with throttle response and torque response. And there's slide control like you get in the Ducatis. They even have a brake slide control, again, like you get in the Ducatis. So if you're good enough, you're hard on the brakes, you use a little bit of the rear brake, it lets the rear swing out and keeps that swing not too extreme. So it lets you back the bike in. A lot of cool stuff happening with the electronics. Finally, I think it's time to talk about pricing and availability. Now, this motorcycle, like I said, will be fully manufactured in the UK. I think production begins in earnest in about June. Customers in Europe should start to receive their bikes perhaps by the end of July. We'll have to see how that goes. And the India launch should also be around that time. How is Norton going to bring this bike into India? A CBU is the best route. There is some ambiguity about how the FTA is going to work out, how much of a benefit they're going to get. Nobody really knows right now, or nobody is really giving us a clear answer at the moment. But we should know soon enough, because I think the India launch, from what I gather, is not many months away. Maybe July, August, sometime there. How much are they going to cost? Again, a lot of that comes down to how Norton wants to position themselves. Because the base model is reasonably priced in the UK. It starts at about £20,000. And then the mid model, if I'm not wrong, is about £24,000. And then there's a big jump up to this bike, which is £38,000. So when you do the conversion, in India, the base model would be 26 lakhs. The mid model would be 33 lakhs. And this would be 48 lakh rupees. The base 2 versions are more affordable than the base 2 Panigales, but more expensive than the S1000, and this is just in a league of its own. I'm keen to see how Norton works this out for our market and what sort of pricing they offer. There will be a unique dealer network set up for these Norton motorcycles, and they will also sell some premium TVS bikes in that dealer network. Now, there will be some exclusive Norton bikes in a few metros, but this will be a brand new dealer network. It allows TVS again to enhance their whole premium offering. This is one area where they struggle. There's a lot of negative feedback about service and things like that for TVS. So they are aware of it and they're working on it, and this new network is going to be a really valuable thing for them. We should see more momentum on that front in the next few months. But overall, to me, this motorcycle is just basically a statement of intent. It's been a wonderful ride today, and it has been genuinely enjoyable on the road, which the latest superbikes aren't. The ZX-10R is too focused, has a weak bottom end. It's really uncomfortable. The Panigale is an animal on the street. The S1000RR, not much better. This is more enjoyable. It's still exhausting. I'm sore all over, but it's good fun. It is a superbike of the old school in a way. It's like a superbike of 10 years ago. I haven't really talked about styling. I was in the room when Norton first unveiled this bike to the world, and the collective response was, people did not expect to see this. But that's because TVS has taken this bike into the future. And the more I look at it right now, I think this is a really beautiful motorcycle. Lovely proportions, fantastic detailing like what they've done with the tail lamp. It's a subtle, sophisticated design. It has really grown on me. The one thing I wish was if there was something out here, maybe a name badge or some sort of graphic. It just looks a little empty out here. But yeah, this is a beautiful motorcycle. You will enjoy looking at it, and so will other people. That is what the Manx R is about. It's a statement of intent, and what's really exciting about the Norton Resurgence are the Atlas models, the middleweight adventure bikes, 585cc twin cylinders. They will be fully made in India, and that really could be a game changer, which again, we will see later this year. But yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Norton is back, and this time it looks like it's back for good, and that's just great for the world of motorcycling in general.